I am Joshua, 31, and my parents boycotted my wedding because I refused to change the date for my brother's vacation. Before I tell you about the explosive moment my wife took the microphone at our reception to expose them, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The clinking of silverware against fine china had completely stopped. The grand ballroom at Barton Creek Resort, decorated with thousands of dollars of white roses and draped with elegant string lights, was dead silent. 165 people sat frozen in their seats. You could hear a pin drop. All eyes in the room were darting between me, sitting at the head table with a knot in my throat, and the two empty chairs situated right in the front row. The name cards resting on the gold-rimmed plates still read Robert and Martha, my father and my mother. They were gone. They had walked out of my life, publicly and intentionally, in front of everyone I cared about. The whispering had started almost immediately after they stormed out of the ceremony hours earlier. People were confused. People were shocked. Some of my extended family members were throwing me looks of pity, while others, the ones loyal to my father's money, glared at me as if I had committed a terrible crime. My hands were shaking under the table. I felt the overwhelming urge to just stand up, grab my coat, and run away from my own wedding. I felt humiliated, but then a soft, warm hand covered mine. I looked up and saw my beautiful new wife, Chloe. She was wearing her gorgeous ivory gown, but her eyes were not those of a weeping bride. They were the eyes of a warrior. She squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. She gave me a single nod. Chloe stood up. The fabric of her dress rustled in the quiet room. She walked confidently over to the DJ booth. The DJ, a young guy who looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole, quickly handed her the wireless microphone. Chloe walked back to the center of the dance floor. The projection screen behind her, which was supposed to be showing a slideshow of our childhood photos, suddenly flickered to life. The screen glowed bright white, casting harsh shadows across the faces of my relatives. I took a deep breath. There was no going back now. My parents thought they could break me. They thought they could embarrass me into submission. But they severely underestimated the woman I had just married. Little did they know, their cruel exit was just the beginning of their downfall. But to understand how we got to this explosive moment, I need to take you back to where this nightmare actually started. Part 1.2. Loi Hua Dui on Den Hong Han, Du Kien, 802. It was December 17, 2023. The air in Austin was crisp and cool. I had spent months planning the perfect proposal for Chloe. I took her to Zilker Park, laid out a blanket under the massive oak trees, and hung string lights from the branches. When I got down on one knee and pulled out the ring I had saved up for, her tears of joy made every second of planning worth it. She said yes. I felt like the luckiest man on the planet. I had found my person, someone who saw me for who I truly was. The very next evening, my parents invited us to their estate in Westlake Hills for a celebratory dinner. It was a massive, sprawling house with vaulted ceilings, marble floors, and a driveway that looked like a luxury car showroom. My father, Robert, owned 3 of the most profitable luxury car dealerships in the state. He sold Rolls-Royce, Lamborghini, Ferrari, and Porsche. Money was never an issue for my family. Power was their currency. During dessert, my mother, Martha, smiled warmly and raised her crystal wine glass. She looked at Chloe, then at me. It was a look of genuine pride, something I rarely received from her. "Joshua, sweetheart," my mother said, her voice dripping with affection. "Your grandparents left something very special for this exact moment." I put my fork down, confused. My grandparents had passed away 4 years prior. They were hardworking, humble people who never fully agreed with my father's flashy lifestyle. My father leaned forward, resting his elbows on the mahogany dining table. "Before your grandfather died, he set up a trust fund," Robert explained, his tone serious and authoritative. "He put aside $120,000. The stipulation in his will was crystal clear. That inheritance goes directly to the very first grandchild to get married, to help start their new life. He pointed a finger directly at my chest. You are the first grandchild to marry, Joshua. That money is yours. We are the trustees, but the money belongs to you. We are going to make sure you two have the wedding of your dreams. I was speechless. $120,000. That was life-changing money. Chloe and I had good jobs, but we were completely independent. We paid our own rent, managed our own bills, and lived on our own salaries. I felt a massive wave of gratitude wash over me. For the first time in my entire life, I felt like my parents were putting me first. I felt seen. I reached across the table and shook my father's hand, thanking him profusely. I hugged my mother. We drove home that night floating on cloud 9, dreaming of the future. I trusted them completely. That was my first and biggest mistake. To understand why that dinner meant so much to me, you have to understand the dynamic of my family. I was the oldest son, but I was the invisible son. The spotlight in our house always belonged to my younger brother, Dylan. Dylan is 28 now. He is what people on the internet call a golden child. While I worked hard through high school and college, securing a solid job as a program coordinator for a youth nonprofit, Dylan took a very different path. He is an Instagram influencer. He spends his days posting highly edited photos of himself lounging by infinity pools in Dubai, eating gold-flake steaks in Paris, and driving the inventory from my dad's luxury dealerships. He has never worked a real 9-to-5 job in his life. My parents funded his entire existence. They paid his rent in a luxury high-rise, covered his designer clothes, and sponsored his lavish content creation trips. They called it investing in his brand. I called it enabling. Growing up, the difference in how we were treated was staggering. If I brought home an A on a calculus exam, my dad would give a brief nod without looking up from his phone. If Dylan managed to get 10,000 views on a trivial social media video, my mother would cater a dinner party to celebrate his genius. I remember a specific family vacation in Aspen a few years ago. We were sitting by the fire, and Dylan was rambling about his plans to become the next massive internet celebrity. My father looked at him with such intense admiration. He patted Dylan on the back and said, "This kid is going to do big things. He has the spark." Then my father turned to look at me. His smile faded slightly into a look of mild boredom. "Joshua, you are steady. Steady is good. You'll be fine. You're the guy who keeps the lights on." I was the guy who kept the lights on, not the star, just the reliable background character. I had accepted that role for a long time. I chose a career in the nonprofit sector because I wanted to help people, not exploit them. I wanted to build something real. I thought the trust fund announcement meant my parents finally respected my path. I thought they finally recognized my worth. By April 2024, Chloe and I were deep into wedding planning. We didn't want to wait around for my parents to access the trust fund right away, so we used our own hard-earned money to secure the major vendors. Between my nonprofit salary and Chloe's income as a financial analyst, we managed to scrape together $52,000 in savings. It took us years of skipping vacations and budgeting every grocery trip to save that money. We toured a dozen venues before we found the Overlook Pavilion at Barton Creek Resort. It was breathtaking. Sweeping views of the Texas Hill Country, outdoor string lights, and enough space for our 200 guests. We met with the venue coordinator, a highly organized woman named Jenna Morrison. "We want it," I told Jenna, handing over the non-refundable deposit check for $8,500. "Fantastic," Jenna smiled, writing in her heavy leather planner. "We will lock you in for October 18th, 2025. You are smart to book 18 months out. Fall dates disappear instantly around here." As soon as we walked out to the parking lot, I pulled out my phone and texted our family group chat. I sent a beautiful picture of the pavilion with the message, "Venue officially booked, October 18th, 2025. We can't wait." Less than 5 minutes later, my mother replied, "Oh, Joshua, the venue is absolutely stunning. October 18th is perfect. The fall weather will make for beautiful photos. Your father and I are so incredibly happy and can't wait to celebrate you." I smiled at my phone, showing the text to Chloe. Everything was falling perfectly into place. The date was set, the deposit was paid, and my family was fully on board. I took a screenshot of that text message and saved it in my wedding folder. At the time, I just wanted to keep it as a nice memory. I had no idea that screenshot would eventually become Exhibit A in the total destruction of my family. Fast forward to July 2025. We were exactly 3 months away from the wedding. The invitations were out, the caterer was paid, and Chloe's dress was undergoing final alterations. I was sitting at my desk at the nonprofit when my phone buzzed with an Instagram notification. It was a post from Dylan. It featured a video of him popping a bottle of champagne on a luxury yacht. The caption read, "Just secured the bag. Booking a 3-week luxury wellness retreat and networking event in Bali. Opportunity of a lifetime. Catch me overseas from October 12th to October 26th. I stared at the screen, my brain trying to process the dates. October 12th to the 26th. My wedding was October 18th. He had booked a vacation directly over my wedding weekend. I felt a sudden drop in my stomach, but I tried to rationalize it. Surely Dylan just made a mistake. Surely he forgot the date and would just reschedule his trip. Before I could even call him, my phone rang. It was my mother, Martha. "Hi, Mom," I answered, stepping out into the hallway. "Did you see Dylan's post? He accidentally booked a trip over the wedding." There was a long, heavy pause on the other end of the line. "Joshua," she started, her voice unnervingly calm and businesslike. "It wasn't an accident. I'm calling you about the wedding date. We need you to move it." I stopped walking. "Move it? Mom, the wedding is in 90 days. We booked this 18 months ago." "I know, sweetheart, but you have to understand," she pressed on. "This Bali retreat is a massive opportunity for Dylan. He is going to be networking with huge international brands. If he cancels now, he loses his deposit. It is an $18,000 trip, Joshua. It is non-refundable." My jaw clenched. $18,000 for a vacation. Chloe and I had drained our life savings to pay for a wedding they promised to help with, and she wanted me to throw it all away for my brother's Instagram grid. "No," I said, my voice firm. "I am not changing the date. We have signed contracts. We have 200 guests who have already booked flights and hotels. Dylan will just have to miss the wedding." The warmth vanished from my mother's voice instantly. "Joshua, this is about family. Dylan's career is finally taking off. Your wedding can happen anytime. You are being incredibly selfish." I hung up the phone. I stood in that hallway, staring blankly at the wall, feeling the familiar, suffocating weight of my childhood crashing back down on me. Once again, I was expected to fold myself into a tiny box so my brother could shine. But not this time. 2 days later, I was summoned to my parents' estate. Chloe insisted on coming with me. When we arrived, the atmosphere in the living room was hostile. My father stood by the massive stone fireplace, holding a glass of scotch. My mother sat on the white leather sofa, her arms crossed tight against her chest. Dylan wasn't even there. He was too busy shopping in Los Angeles. My father didn't even say hello. He skipped the pleasantries and went straight for the throat. "Your mother tells me you are refusing to accommodate your brother," Robert growled, the ice clinking in his glass. "I'm not accommodating a vacation that he booked knowing my wedding date, Dad," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "We would lose tens of thousands of dollars if we cancel now." "We will pay the cancellation fees," my mother interjected smoothly. "Just move the wedding to next spring. Everyone wins." Chloe spoke up, her financial analyst brain kicking in. "Mrs. Unoa, the cancellation fees aren't just a few $100s. We lose the venue, the catering, the photographer. It would cost over $25,000 just to break the contracts, plus the cost of rebooking everything at next year's inflated rates. It makes zero financial sense." My father slammed his glass down on the mantelpiece. The sound echoed through the massive room. "Do not lecture me about finances in my own house. I run a multimillion-dollar business. I know how money works." He pointed a thick finger at me. You are acting like a spoiled brat, Joshua. You are prioritizing a party over your own brother's future. Since you refuse to compromise, I am going to teach you a lesson in humility. He took a step toward me, his face red with anger. If you do not change the date by tomorrow morning, you are completely cut off. Do not expect us at the wedding. Do not expect our support. And that $120,000 trust fund? Consider it gone. You will not see a single dime of it. You will get absolutely nothing from us. I felt the blood drain from my face. They were weaponizing my own grandfather's money to force me to bow to Dylan. You can't do that, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Grandpa left that for me. I am the trustee. My father spat back with a cruel smile. I decide what happens to it. Now get out of my house. Chloe grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the door. We walked out into a torrential Texas downpour. We got into our car, soaking wet, and I finally broke down. I hit the steering wheel, screaming in frustration. Chloe just held me as the rain pounded against the windshield. To make matters worse, later that night, my cousin Caleb texted me. Caleb had always been the family peacekeeper. Hey man, Caleb's text read. I heard what happened. Uncle Robert is totally out of line. I support you 100%. Don't let them bully you. I felt a small glimmer of hope. At least someone in the family had my back. I thanked him for his support. Little did I know Caleb was a snake. A week later, another relative accidentally let it slip that Caleb had immediately taken screenshots of my vulnerable, emotional texts and sent them straight to Dylan and my parents, mocking me for crying like a baby. The betrayal cut deep. I was completely surrounded by toxic people. For 47 days, my parents did not speak a single word to me. No texts, no calls. Total radio silence. I reached out a few times, trying to find some kind of middle ground, but I was sent straight to voicemail. Meanwhile, Dylan posted nonstop about his upcoming trip, and my parents liked and commented on every single photo, praising his hustle. I was emotionally exhausted, but I was determined to push forward. Chloe and I finalized the seating charts, paid the final balances with our remaining savings, and prepared for a wedding without my immediate family. Then, exactly 8 days before the wedding, I received an email that made my blood run cold. It was from Jenna Morrison, the venue coordinator at Barton Creek. The subject line read, "Urgent. Conflicting instructions regarding your event." I opened the email with trembling hands. "Hi Joshua," Jenna wrote. "I am reaching out because I have received some very concerning communication regarding your October 18th event. I need to clarify with you directly before I take any action. Please see the attached email chain. Let me know how you wish to proceed." I scrolled down to the attachments. There were 3 separate emails forwarded to me. All of them were from my mother's email address. The first one was dated a month ago. "Hello Jenna. This is Martha Unoa, mother of the groom. We need to discuss canceling the October 18th event immediately. Please call me." The second email, sent a week later. "Jenna, I understand there are non-refundable policies, but the groom is making a massive mistake. This is a family emergency. We need to pull the plug on this wedding. Please advise on how to terminate the contract." The third email, sent just 2 days prior. "As the mother of the groom, I am officially demanding that you cancel this event. This wedding should not proceed. Do not contact Joshua. Handle this with me directly." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding against my ribs. My own mother, my flesh and blood. She wasn't just boycotting my wedding. She was actively, maliciously trying to destroy it behind my back. She was trying to sabotage the happiest day of my life just to punish me for not bowing to Dylan. I printed the emails out. I didn't cry this time. The sadness was gone. It was replaced by a cold, hard, terrifying anger. I showed the papers to Chloe when she got home from work. She read them, her face turning pale, and then her expression hardened into pure steel. "Okay," Chloe said, her voice dangerously calm. "They want to play dirty? I think it's time I do some digging." Chloe is a senior financial analyst. She deals with corporate audits, forensic accounting, and tracking missing funds. She is brilliant. When we first started dating years ago, I had given her legal power of attorney to help me manage some old investments and consolidate my bank accounts. Because my parents used the same private wealth management firm for the trust, my name was still technically linked to the primary account routing numbers. That night, Chloe sat at our kitchen island, surrounded by glowing monitors, hacking her way through the bureaucratic red tape of the banking portal. She spent 4 hours clicking through ledgers, cross-referencing dates, and analyzing transfer histories. At 2 a.m., she called me into the kitchen. "Sit down," she said, pointing to the stool. She didn't look triumphant. She looked disgusted. She turned her laptop screen toward me. It was the transaction history for the trust fund my grandfather had left me. In January of this year, Chloe pointed to the top line. The trust had a balance of exactly $120,000, intact, waiting for you. She scrolled down to a highlighted section. "Look at this date," she instructed. I squinted at the screen. July 18th, 2025. That was 5 days before the family meeting, I noted. 5 days before my dad threatened to cut me off if I didn't change the date. "Exactly," Chloe said softly. "Now look at the transaction. Withdrawal amount, $80,000. Recipient, Dylan Unoa. Memo line, advanced business/lifestyle distribution." Couldn't breathe. My lungs felt like they had collapsed. $80,000. "They stole it," I whispered, the reality crashing over me. They didn't just withhold it to punish me. They had already raided the account and given the money to Dylan before they even asked me to move the wedding. "It gets worse," Chloe said, pulling up the original trust documents we had on file. The legal language of this trust is airtight. It explicitly states the funds are to be distributed to the first grandchild upon marriage. Dylan isn't married. He isn't even engaged. Your parents, as trustees, have a fiduciary duty to act in your best interest. Giving away $80,000 of your designated inheritance to your brother is a massive, textbook breach of fiduciary duty. It is highly illegal. I put my head in my hands. The betrayal was so absolute, so profound, it felt surreal. They had stolen my grandfather's gift, lied to my face, tried to cancel my wedding, and blamed me for tearing the family apart. "What do we do?" I asked, looking up at her. Chloe's eyes flashed with a fierce, protective fire. "We let them think they won. We let them show up to the wedding. And then, at the reception, we show everyone exactly who they really are. We burn their fake reputation to the ground." October 18th, 2025. The day of the wedding. Despite the looming storm, the morning was beautiful. I stood at the altar in the Overlook Pavilion, wearing a tailored black tuxedo, watching the woman of my dreams walk down the aisle. The sun was setting over the hills, casting a golden glow over the 200 guests. Against all odds, my parents had actually shown up. They arrived late, avoiding the ushers, and sat in the very last row, as far away from the altar as possible. They wore sour, miserable expressions, refusing to speak to anyone. I ignored them. I focused entirely on Chloe. The ceremony was proceeding beautifully. Pastor John, a kind older man who had known me for years, delivered a touching sermon about loyalty and commitment. Then, he reached the traditional, largely ceremonial part of the script. "If anyone here has any objections to this union, speak now, or forever hold your peace." Normally, this is met with a polite silence, but not today. From the back row, a chair scraped loudly against the stone floor. I looked up. My father, Robert, was standing. He adjusted his expensive suit jacket, puffed out his chest, and projected his voice so the entire pavilion could hear. "I object," Robert boomed. Gasps rippled through the crowd. People turned around in their chairs, eyes wide with shock. Pastor John froze, unsure of what to do. My father pointed an accusatory finger down the aisle at me. "Joshua, your mother and I are leaving. You have shown zero respect for this family. You have chosen your own selfish desires over your brother's future. Think about what you've done." We will not sit here and be a part of this terrible mistake. Next to him, my mother stood up. She covered her face with her hands and began to sob loudly, putting on a theatrical performance of a heartbroken mother. Together, they turned around and marched out of the pavilion, my mother's heels clicking aggressively against the pavement. They walked down the path toward the parking lot, leaving a trail of absolute devastation behind them. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. 50 of my relatives sat with their mouths open. Some were whispering frantically. My cousin Caleb looked smug. I felt a tear slip down my cheek. The humiliation was crushing. But then, my Uncle Thomas, my father's younger brother, stood up from the second row. He walked up to the altar, stood directly beside me, and put a heavy, reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Keep going, son," Uncle Thomas said, his voice loud enough for the front rows to hear. The trash just took itself out. I looked at Chloe. She gave me that same fierce nod. I turned to Pastor John, cleared my throat and said, "Please continue." We exchanged our vows, we exchanged rings, and we kissed. But the atmosphere was tainted. The tension carried over into the cocktail hour. I knew the whispers were circulating. People thought I was the villain. They thought I had broken my parents' hearts. They were about to learn the truth. Dinner was served at 7 p.m. The ballroom was stunning, the filet mignon was perfect, but nobody was eating. The air was thick with awkward tension. At 8:15 p.m., it was time for the toasts. My best man, Connor, gave a brief, funny speech that managed to get a few tense laughs. Then, the DJ announced, "And now, a special presentation from the bride." Chloe stood up, the microphone in hand, and the projection screen lit up behind her. The title slide, in massive bold letters, read, "The Price of Humility." "Thank you all for being here," Chloe started, her voice echoing through the silent room. "Earlier today, my father-in-law interrupted our ceremony. He accused Joshua of being selfish. He said Joshua needed to learn humility. Well, tonight, I want to show all of you exactly what that humility costs, and exactly who has been paying for it." She clicked the remote. Slide 2 appeared. It was a scan of my grandfather's will, with the specific clause highlighted in bright yellow. In 2019, Joshua's grandfather left a trust fund of $120,000, legally designated for his first grandchild's wedding, Chloe explained clearly. "That is Joshua, not Dylan. Joshua." She clicked again. Slide 3. The bank statement she had uncovered. On July 18th, 5 days before Robert and Martha demanded we cancel this wedding to accommodate Dylan's vacation, they did this. The screen displayed the $80,000 transfer to Dylan. The room erupted into gasps. Aunt Rachel, my father's sister, covered her mouth with both hands. $80,000. Chloe's voice rose, commanding the room. Stolen from Joshua's legal inheritance and given to Dylan to fund his lifestyle. While Robert told Joshua he would get absolutely nothing, they were secretly raiding his trust fund. She didn't stop there. Click. Slides 4 through 7 were screenshots of Dylan's Instagram, showing him partying in Bali, flying first class, popping champagne with dates overlapping our wedding. Click. Slide 8. The emails from my mother to Jenna, the venue coordinator. Chloe read them out loud, word for word, exposing my mother's desperate, malicious attempts to cancel our wedding behind our backs. The crowd was practically vibrating with shock. Someone in the back muttered, "Oh my God!" And finally, Chloe said, her voice dropping to a low, deadly pitch, "After Robert stood up today and publicly shamed his son for tearing the family apart, claiming they had no money to help us, I found one more thing." Click. Slide 9. It was a fresh bank transfer, dated September 10th. Source account, Robert's personal checking. Recipient, Dylan Unoa. Amount, $15,500. Memo, Bali trip extension and Italy excursions. $15,500, Chloe announced. Transferred directly from Robert's personal account to extend Dylan's vacation into Europe. They humiliated Joshua today to protect a vacation they funded with stolen money. Chloe put the microphone back on the stand. She walked over to the head table, picked up a stack of manila folders, and dropped them onto the center table. If anyone here wants hard copies of these bank statements, emails, and legal documents, feel free to take a folder. Joshua didn't learn humility today. He learned who his family really is. The silence in the room was absolute. Then Aunt Rachel stood up. Tears were streaming down her face. She started clapping. Slow at first, then faster. Uncle Thomas stood up next to her, clapping fiercely. Within 10 seconds, all 165 guests were on their feet, delivering a deafening standing ovation. Not for a wedding toast, but for the truth. This is the moment that changed everything, when I finally regained control of my life. Thank you for your patience with me this far. You are amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting number 1 below, so I know you've been with me this far. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. The aftermath of Chloe's presentation was absolute chaos. The standing ovation lasted for nearly 2 minutes. When the applause finally died down, the dynamic in the room had completely shifted. The invisible chains that had tied me to my father's toxic empire were shattered on the floor. Aunt Rachel was the first to approach the head table. Her mascara was running down her cheeks, ruining her expensive makeup. She threw her arms around me, pulling me into a crushing hug. "Joshua, I am so sorry," Aunt Rachel sobbed into my shoulder. "I swear to God, I had no idea. We all thought you were just being stubborn. Robert spun this massive web of lies. I am so deeply sorry." Uncle Thomas came up right behind her. He didn't cry. He looked furious. He grabbed my hand and shook it hard. "You did the right thing letting Chloe expose them," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "Robert is a monster. He crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. I am cutting all business ties with his dealerships tomorrow. I am done with him." While my true supporters rallied around me, the fake ones scattered like roaches when the lights turn on. I watched from the head table as my cousin Caleb, the snake who had been leaking my text messages to Dylan, turned ghost white. He scrambled out of his chair, didn't make eye contact with anyone, and practically sprinted out the back doors of the ballroom. About 15 other guests, mostly my father's arrogant golf buddies and business associates who relied on his money, quickly grabbed their coats and hurried out to the valet. They couldn't handle the truth. They didn't want to be caught on the wrong side of the fallout. I watched them leave, and for the first time in my life I felt no anxiety. I felt light. The people who were walking out the door were the people who had never truly valued me anyway. The people who remained, over 140 genuine friends, Chloe's family, and the good side of my relatives, were the only ones who mattered. My phone, which was sitting face down on the table, started vibrating endlessly. The group chats were exploding. My father was probably calling, screaming into the void. I picked up the phone, powered it off entirely, and shoved it deep into my pocket. "Not tonight," I said, looking at Chloe. She was glowing, a fierce, beautiful smile on her face. "Tonight we celebrate." Connor, my best man, sprinted up to the DJ booth. "All right, folks," Connor yelled into the mic, his energy infectious. "The trash has been taken out. The truth is on the table. Now let's get this real party started." The DJ hit play on a high-energy dance track, and the room exploded. The tension that had been choking us all night completely evaporated. It was like a massive weight had been lifted off the entire building. The dance floor was packed instantly. People were laughing louder, dancing harder, and drinking more freely than at any wedding I had ever attended. It wasn't just a celebration of our marriage anymore. It was a celebration of liberation. We danced until our feet blistered. At 11:30 p.m., as the catering staff began clearing the final tables, Chloe and I retreated to the bridal suite to grab our overnight bags. I sat on the edge of the couch, exhausted but exhilarated. I turned my phone back on just to check the time. My screen was flooded with notifications. 32 missed calls from my parents. Dozens of frantic texts from Dylan, calling me a traitor and a liar. I ignored all of them. But there was one notification that caught my eye. A voicemail from an unknown number. I tapped play, putting it on speaker for Chloe to hear. "Hi, Joshua." A sharp, professional female voice echoed in the quiet room. "This is Amanda Chun, an investigative reporter with KVUE News in Austin. We received several tips tonight, along with some highly concerning documents, regarding a public incident at your wedding involving Robert Unoa of Unoa Auto Group and a stolen trust fund. We are running a story on his business ethics for the morning broadcast. Please call me back if you'd like to provide a comment." Chloe and I looked at each other. The spark we lit in that ballroom had already caught fire outside. The storm wasn't over. In fact, for my parents, the real nightmare was just beginning. I smiled, deleted the voicemail, and pulled my wife in for a kiss. We were ready for war. The morning after my wedding, I woke up in the bridal suite with a strange sense of profound peace. The crushing anxiety that had plagued me for the past 18 months was completely gone. I rolled over, looked at Chloe sleeping peacefully next to me, and smiled. We had actually done it. We survived the storm. But when I finally reached for my phone and turned it back on, I realized the storm outside our little bubble was just escalating into a Category 5 hurricane. My phone vibrated so hard and so continuously that it actually grew hot in my hand. I had hundreds of text messages, thousands of social media notifications, and a dozen more voicemails. The story of my wedding had not just leaked. It had exploded. I opened Facebook, and the first thing I saw was a viral post from one of Chloe's cousins. It detailed exactly what happened at the reception, complete with blurry photos of the PowerPoint slides Chloe had presented. The post already had 4,000 shares. People I had never even met were leaving furious comments. They were absolutely ripping my parents apart. Someone had started the hashtag Justice for Joshua, and it was trending locally in Austin. But social media was just the appetizer. The main course was on the local news. We turned on the television in the hotel room and switched it to KVUE News. Sure enough, Amanda Chun, the investigative reporter who had left me that voicemail, was standing live outside the gleaming glass windows of my father's flagship Porsche and Rolls-Royce dealership. "Good morning, Austin," Amanda said into the camera, her expression dead serious. "We are live outside Unoa Auto Group in Westlake, where local business mogul Robert Unoa is facing massive public backlash this morning. Multiple sources, including close family members, have come forward alleging that Robert and his wife Martha embezzled $80,000 from their own son's legal inheritance. Documents obtained by KVUE News show this trust fund money was secretly diverted to fund an extravagant European vacation for their younger son, a local social media influencer. This shocking revelation was made public last night in a dramatic presentation during the victim's own wedding reception. I sat up in bed, my jaw practically hitting the floor. They were broadcasting it to the entire city. Amanda Chun even interviewed my Uncle Thomas. They had a clip of him standing outside the wedding venue, looking right into the camera. "My brother made a terrible, unforgivable mistake," Uncle Thomas said on national television. "He let his massive pride and his blatant favoritism destroy his relationship with a good, hard-working son. Now he is facing the consequences, both legal and social, exactly as he should. I haven't seen our family this bitterly divided since my grandfather's funeral. The fallout for my father's business was instantaneous and brutal. My dad's empire relied heavily on his reputation. He sold Rolls-Royce, Lamborghini, Ferrari, and Porsche to the local elite. These were businessmen, athletes, and tech billionaires who cared deeply about their public image. They did not want to buy $500,000 cars from a man currently trending online for stealing his own child's inheritance." According to Uncle Thomas, who still had friends inside the company, the dealership's phones were ringing off the hook all morning. But they weren't sales calls. They were cancellations. 3 different high-profile clients called to cancel their custom Lamborghini orders, stating they refused to do business with a thief. Protesters, Angry locals who had seen the news actually showed up on the sidewalk outside the Ferrari lot holding signs that read, "Family values?" More like family lies. By the end of the week, the dealership's revenue had plummeted by a staggering 35%. I honestly wondered if the immense pressure of this public scandal would eventually end in a messy divorce for my parents, considering how much they valued their pristine social standing. But I wasn't just going to sit back and watch the media tear them apart. I wanted real, tangible justice. I wanted the money my grandfather had intended for me to have. On Tuesday morning, Chloe and I walked into the downtown Austin office of David Brennan. David was a high-powered, aggressive lawyer who specialized in trust and estate litigation. He wore a sharp navy suit, had silver hair, and possessed the kind of calm, intimidating aura that told you he never lost a case. We sat across from his massive mahogany desk. I handed him the manila folder containing the trust documents, the bank statements showing the $80,000 transfer to Dylan, and the $15,000 transfer from my dad's personal account. I also handed him the vicious emails my mother had sent to the venue coordinator. David spent 20 minutes reading through everything in total silence. The only sound in the room was the ticking of a grandfather clock and the rustling of paper. Finally, he closed the folder, folded his hands, and looked directly at me. "Joshua," David said, his voice deep and steady, "I have been practicing law for almost 30 years. I have seen families do terrible things to each other over money. But the blatant, arrogant paper trail your parents left behind is almost unbelievable. You have an absolute airtight case for breach of fiduciary duty." "What exactly does that mean for us?" Chloe asked, taking out a notepad. "It means your parents, as the appointed trustees, had a strict legal obligation to act solely in Joshua's best interest," David explained. "By diverting that money to a sibling who was not the legal beneficiary, they broke state law. That $80,000 distribution to Dylan was entirely illegal. We are going straight for the throat. We are going to demand the full restoration of the original $120,000 trust, plus punitive damages for emotional distress and deliberate financial sabotage, and all of my legal fees." He did some quick math on his legal pad. "I am drafting a demand for $193,000. If they refuse to settle, we take them to court. Given the current media circus surrounding his dealerships, Robert Unoa will not want to stand in front of a judge and a jury. He will want to sweep this under the rug as fast as humanly possible." I took a deep breath. Suing my own parents felt like stepping off a cliff into the unknown. But then I remembered the 2 empty chairs at my wedding. I remembered the smirk on my father's face when he told me I would get nothing. "Do it," I told the lawyer. "Draft the lawsuit. I want every single penny." David Brennan filed the lawsuit in Travis County District Court on Thursday. The official complaint listed breach of fiduciary duty, conversion of assets, and unjust enrichment. The papers were served directly to my father at his flagship Porsche dealership on Friday afternoon. I heard through the grapevine that he completely lost his mind in the showroom, throwing a heavy glass paperweight at the wall when the process server handed him the envelope. As David predicted, my father's corporate lawyers panicked. They knew they had absolutely no defense. The bank statements were black and white. Within 3 days, their legal team contacted David begging for an emergency mediation. They wanted to settle out of court, and they wanted an aggressive non-disclosure agreement to stop the negative press from bleeding their luxury car business completely dry. The mediation took place exactly 2 weeks after my wedding. We met in a completely neutral, high-security office building downtown. The tension in the air was so thick you could cut it with a knife. When Chloe and I walked into the lobby, I saw them, my father and my mother. They were sitting on a leather bench near the elevators. My father looked like he had aged 10 years in 14 days. The arrogant, untouchable billionaire posture was entirely gone. He looked exhausted, deflated, and furious. My mother refused to make eye contact with me. She stared down at her expensive designer handbag, her lips pressed into a thin, bitter line. We didn't say a single word to each other. We didn't even nod. We were placed in separate, soundproof conference rooms. A retired state judge acted as the mediator, shuttling back and forth down the long hallway between our room and my parents' room. The negotiations started off rocky. My parents' lawyers tried to play hardball, offering to simply return the $80,000 they had given to Dylan, claiming the rest of the trust fund was lost to administrative fees. David Brennan actually laughed out loud when the mediator brought us that offer. "Tell them," David instructed the mediator, his eyes flashing with shark-like intensity, "that if they do not agree to the full $193,000 within the next hour, Joshua and his lovely wife will be granting an exclusive 1-hour live television interview with KVUE News tomorrow morning. We will bring the PowerPoint." The mediator nodded and walked back down the hall. We sat in silence, sipping stale coffee. Chloe held my hand under the table, her thumb gently rubbing my knuckles. 20 minutes later, the mediator returned. He looked exhausted but relieved. "They caved," the mediator announced, dropping a thick stack of papers on the table. "They have agreed to the full amount, $193,000. However, they have one strict condition for the settlement. They want an ironclad non-disclosure agreement. No more social media posts, no more interviews. You take the money, they take the lesson, and everyone walks away in silence." David looked at me, waiting for my decision. I thought about the money. I thought about how much it would help Chloe and me start our new life. I didn't care about being famous on the internet. I just wanted to be free of them. "I will sign the NDA," I said firmly. "But I have one condition of my own. Add it to the contract." "What is it?" the mediator asked, picking up his pen. "I want a written apology," I demanded. "Drafted by David, signed by both Robert and Martha Unoa. I want them to admit, in writing, that they allowed pride and toxic favoritism to dictate their actions. I want them to admit they violated their legal duty as parents and trustees. If they don't sign that paper admitting their guilt, I will walk out of here right now and see them in a public courtroom." The mediator sighed and walked back down the hall. This was the ultimate test. My father's ego was his most prized possession. Asking him to sign a document admitting he was a terrible father and a thief was like asking him to cut off his own arm. We waited for what felt like an eternity. 45 minutes passed. I started to wonder if I had pushed too far. Finally, the heavy wooden door opened. The mediator walked in holding a single sheet of paper. He slid it across the table to me. At the bottom of the page, beneath a paragraph detailing their failures, were 2 signatures in black ink. Robert Unoa and Martha Unoa. They had signed it. Their pride was officially broken. I stared at the signatures, expecting to feel a massive wave of triumph. But honestly, I just felt empty. It was just ink on paper. It didn't change the past 31 years of neglect. But it did legally close the door on our relationship forever. We signed the settlement papers and walked out of the building. But the drama had one final, pathetic gasp. As we were walking to our car in the parking garage, my phone buzzed. It was a text message from my mother, Martha. Even after losing the mediation, her toxic nature couldn't be contained. "You let that manipulative woman ruin our family," her text read, referring to Chloe. "I hope you are happy with your blood money. Don't ever call us again." I stopped walking. I looked at the text message, and then I looked at Chloe, the woman who had fought like a lion to protect me. I didn't type a response. I didn't get angry. I simply blocked her number, deleted the contact, and threw the printed apology letter into a nearby trash can. I didn't need their fake apology. I had my justice. 3 days later, the wire transfer cleared. I opened my banking app, and there it was. $193,000 sitting securely in our joint account. The war was officially over. We had won. 6 months passed. It was now April 2026. The dust from the wedding scandal had completely settled, and the silence from my family was actually the most beautiful sound I had ever heard in my life. With the massive settlement money acting as a solid financial foundation, Chloe and I decided it was time to put down our own roots. We bought our very first home in a quiet, beautiful neighborhood just outside of Austin. It was a spacious 4-bedroom house with a big backyard and a wraparound porch. It didn't have the cold, intimidating marble floors or the luxury car driveway of my father's Westlake estate. It was warm. It was inviting. It was ours. We paid a massive chunk of the down payment using the settlement, and we easily managed the remaining mortgage on our own. We didn't need a dime of my parents' conditional money. We lived comfortably off our own salary. Life was moving forward in the best way possible. Chloe recently got a massive promotion at her financial firm, stepping up to a senior director role. And the biggest news of all? We were expecting our first child. Chloe was 14 weeks pregnant. We were going to have a baby boy. While our lives were flourishing, the reality for my brother Dylan was a stark, depressing contrast. The viral scandal had absolutely decimated his fake online persona. When the internet found out that his luxurious influencer lifestyle was entirely funded by money stolen from his older brother's wedding fund, the backlash was merciless. His Instagram comments were flooded with thousands of angry people calling him a fraud, a thief, and a spoiled brat. His follower count, which had once been his proudest achievement, tanked dramatically. He lost over 70,000 followers in a matter of weeks. But worse than the follower drop was the corporate fallout. The luxury brands and wellness companies that used to sponsor his trips dropped him like a bad habit. No reputable company wanted their brand associated with a widely publicized family embezzlement scandal. Dylan was forced to cancel his extended European tour and fly back to Austin in disgrace. Without his sponsorships, and with my father's dealerships taking a massive financial hit, the endless river of cash that funded his luxury apartment and designer clothes completely dried up. I heard through Uncle Thomas that Dylan was actually forced to move back into my parents' house. The golden child was finally experiencing the real world, and he was failing miserably. One lazy Sunday afternoon, Chloe and I were in the new house, wearing paint-splattered clothes. We were painting the nursery for our future son. We chose a soft, calming sage green color. The afternoon sun was streaming through the window, illuminating the small wooden crib we had spent 3 hours assembling the night before. I took a step back, wiping a smudge of green paint off my forehead, and looked around the room. I felt a sudden, overwhelming wave of emotion hit me. I was going to be a father. I was going to be responsible for a little boy's entire world. Chloe walked up behind me and wrapped her arms around my waist, resting her chin on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly, noticing the tears pooling in my eyes. "I'm thinking about him," I said, placing my hand over hers on her stomach. "I'm thinking about how different his life is going to be. I am never going to make him feel the way Robert made me feel. I will never make him compete for my love. I will never use money to control his choices. I will never give them joint custody of my peace of mind or my child's happiness." Chloe smiled and kissed my cheek. "I know you won't. You are going to be an incredible dad, Joshua. You've already proven you know how to protect your family." Later that evening, we sat at our kitchen table with our laptops open. We were drafting the paperwork for a brand new, legally ironclad college fund and trust for our unborn son. We were setting it up with complete transparency, managed by a neutral third-party financial institution. There would be no hidden clauses, no manipulative strings attached, and no abusive trustees. We were breaking the cycle of financial abuse right then and there. We were building a legacy based on love and support, not power and control. A few weeks later, we hosted a small backyard barbecue at our new house to celebrate the start of summer. We invited Connor, Chloe's parents, Uncle Thomas, and Aunt Rachel. The grill was smoking, the music was playing, and the atmosphere was filled with genuine, effortless joy. There was no tension, no walking on eggshells, no pretending to be someone I wasn't to appease an arrogant billionaire. After we finished eating, Aunt Rachel pulled me aside. We stood by the wooden fence, watching the sun slowly dip below the horizon. She looked nervous, holding her plastic cup of lemonade tightly with both hands. "Joshua," Aunt Rachel started, her voice hesitant, "I need to tell you something. I had lunch with your father yesterday. I felt my posture stiffen slightly, but I kept my voice calm. "Oh, how is Robert doing?" "He is miserable," she replied honestly. "The business is struggling to bounce back. Dylan is driving them crazy living at home, and, well, he knows about the baby. Word gets around." She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "He asked about you, Joshua. He wanted me to ask if there was any chance at all, that he and Martha could meet their grandson when he is born. He says he wants to make things right." I looked across the yard. I saw Chloe laughing with her mother. I saw Uncle Thomas telling a joke to Connor. I looked at the beautiful, peaceful life I had fought so incredibly hard to build. I turned back to Aunt Rachel and gave her a sad, but firm smile. "Rachel, I love you, and I appreciate you passing along the message," I said quietly. But the answer is absolutely no. They had 31 years to make things right with me. They chose money. They chose pride. They chose Dylan. My son is never going to know the toxic environment I grew up in. Actions have consequences, and Robert's consequence is that he doesn't get to be a grandfather to my child. That door is nailed shut. Aunt Rachel nodded slowly, tears welling up in her eyes. "I understand. I really do. You are a good man, Joshua. Your grandfather would be so incredibly proud of the life you have built." That night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, I stood by the large bay window in our living room, looking out at the quiet, tree-lined street. I realized that the pain of losing my parents was completely overshadowed by the joy of finding my true family. And that brings me to the end of my story. But before I log off, I want to say something incredibly important to anyone watching this video right now who might be going through a similar nightmare. If you are trapped in a family dynamic where love is treated like a transaction, if you have parents or siblings who use money, inheritance, or guilt to manipulate your life choices, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You do not owe your abusers your peace of mind just because you share the same DNA. Toxic behavior does not get a free pass just because it comes wrapped in the label of family. Setting boundaries is not selfish. It is a basic act of survival. Walking away from people who consistently disrespect you, lie to you, and steal from you is the bravest thing you can possibly do. It will hurt. It will be terrifying. You will face judgment from people who don't know the whole truth. But on the other side of that fear is a level of freedom and genuine happiness you cannot even begin to imagine. Remember this: some families are simply the people you are born to. But your true family, the one that matters, is the family you choose to build. The people who stand by you when the room goes quiet. The people who fight for you when you are too tired to fight for yourself. Protect your peace. Know your worth. And never, ever let anyone teach you humility by tearing you down. I hope my journey has given you some clarity or courage today. If you found value in the lessons I shared, please take a second to comment the word "good" down below, or share the most important lesson you are taking away from this story. It truly helps me know that sharing my pain was worth it, and it helps push this video out to other people who might desperately need to hear it today. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next one.